tried the Lose It app, you've tried MyFitnessPal, and you're probably still doing all of those and just have failed miserably multiple times, not on your own, but because your body's fighting against you. And so let's consider this GLP-1.
Maybe this is the chance to finally break the cycle of obesity.
I dare you to look at food labels from today and match them against food labels in the 1980s.
Are we just crossing our fingers that the long-term effects are okay, and we're just gonna?
I mean, yes.
Nowadays, the modern weight loss drugs like semaglutide and tirzepatide, there's known as Ozempic and Wegovy and Zepbound and all that stuff, they can take your food drive and turn dial it as low as you like based with your doctor's consultation. So now we have medications that take food drive from a person who's psychotic about food just genetically and turn dial it to someone who just thinks food is normal, and their body weight almost always follows. They are safe, they are healthy, and you're probably better off taking them in most cases if you have trouble with obesity than not taking
So we have Dr. Viet Lee joining us today. He's an expert in all this stuff, and I want to get his reaction on kind of the hot topic of drugs like Ozempic for weight loss. We just saw this popular content creator talk about it, and I want to get your reaction. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice that he's speaking the language of people. He's not wrong in most respects. I think that he did a great job of really speaking to what can be super sciencey stuff. I wouldn't use food psychotic or anything like that. But he is using correct, terminology that there is some genetic determination, but there is also variation in how we all interact with our environment in general, but here food specifically. So I think it's okay. Actually, what he said, and it's really where my practice has been. Yeah, I mean, those that have obesity, whether it's overweight by BMI classification or obesity by BMI classification, these medications have been super helpful in augmenting and supporting that journey for weight management. So I'm actually quite in favor of this very simple, straightforward, and TikTokish presentation. That was really nice, actually.
So my reactions, I have some very mixed feelings about the GLP-1 inhibitors like Ozempic. On one hand, I've seen through a lot of my own population health studies that obesity just makes everything worse. No matter if you are chronic disease free, that it just makes your quality of life worse. It impairs your ability to be happy, to live the life that people want to. And then I think in every instance of chronic disease, obesity just makes things even worse. It exacerbates the condition. It lowers quality of life even from where it would be. And I think from that side, I think that obesity is just a terrible thing. It's a byproduct of the modern lifestyle. I understand that byproduct of having highly palatable foods with high calorie counts, very, very available in a way that evolution just did not prepare us for managing weight in this environment. And so I don't like obesity, and I think Ozempic could be a great way to break the cycle of obesity. However, Ozempic, I got a couple things here. I think that too often we conflate being thin with being healthy. And I think that often healthy people are thin, but not all thin people are healthy. And I'm cautious that Ozempic could become a crutch where people can use it as a chance to cover up an unhealthy lifestyle. And so rather than learn how to regulate their appetite, learn how to regulate their food intake, learn how to increase appropriate activities, that there's a risk that people will use Ozempic as a quick fix to a problem without lifestyle change. And so they can lose the weight without having changed themselves and changed their approach to life so they can live a healthy, more fulfilling lifestyle.
Yeah, those are such great points. I think that in particular, where you discuss thinness as equated to healthiness, and you're absolutely correct. It isn't healthy just by being thin. We see that in the South Asian populations where BMI is a little bit lower and perhaps they look thin. But actually, you'll notice that there's a lot of visceral adiposity that occurs. So when we're talking about heavy or obese, it's actually, and Steve Nissen does a great job of this. He's a physician back east at the Cleveland Clinic and is on multiple phase 3 clinical trials. He really talks about visceral adiposity centered disease. What you're seeing is really the outward manifestation of an internal disease. And so, yes, there can be skinny, thin individuals that are not healthy. But I don't think that's the goal here. What we do know is that when you do have visceral adiposity, you're more likely to be unhealthy. And a larger population, if you'll excuse the pun, I mean, they have more disease. I share a slide that I just presented last night, actually, for Rocky Mountain University on keeping yourself healthy. And it, when you have a BMI of over 30, the prevalence of metabolic dysfunction associated liver disease is between 50 and 90%. Half to up to 90% have metabolic associated steatotic liver disease. That's with a BMI of 30 or greater. Okay, that's epidemiology. It's not patient specific, but as you look at a population that has a BMI of over 30, that's already disease. So you can already equate that with saying, well, if you're obese by WHO criteria, you've already got disease. It's not just obese. So I think the other points here are just so important too. Lifestyle, lifestyle, lifestyle. But what it almost presupposes is that individuals that are obese have not been trying. And I know that's not what you meant. I will tell you, I just had a patient today who gave me permission to talk about his case because, again, I've kind of mentioned this before. Almost all my patients, actually, all of them are provided my cell phone number, and I asked them to text me if they would like to, have some quicker communication. Well, he texted me. We talked about this very thing. And he said, it is so relieving to finally be successful at all of the diet choices he was trying to make. But as this exercise scientist, mentioned, it's like you get food psychotic. He just could not overcome the cravings. No matter what he was doing, he was already exercising. But what he said is now that he's lost 10 to 15 pounds, he's so much more comfortable and he's lifting. He's implemented a strength training program because he's feeling comfortable going to the gym. And he's finding success in making those food changes stick. Whereas before he had a plan and he was following the plan, but he'd find himself going and eating things. And he'd be like, why did I just do that? So we had this conversation, and I would say it's wrong to presuppose that people aren't doing lifestyle changes. The problem is that hormonally and neuroendocrinology wise, or neuroendocrinologic, their body's fighting them. So you have to support and augment that. It's not, I know it's like the cheat code that all of us want to look, svelte for beach season, but that's not the point here. The point for these individuals is really having the opportunity to augment and support what they're already trying to do. It's very frustrating to see them try again and really not get that health.
No, and I mean, you're right. I wasn't trying to imply
Yeah,
people,
no, totally.
I just don't
Yeah.
want to. They just want
Oh,
to cheat,
yes,
so they're
you
not
were.
trying.
I'm just
No,
kidding.
I'm not.
I'm
I've even
kidding.
struggled myself
I
with
know
weight
you were.
loss and really trying to maintain it. And I know how difficult it is. And I've
we
watched
all
loved
do,
ones
in
struggle.
in
Yeah,
some ways,
yeah.
because the food industry, at least in the United States, right, is optimized to sell products because they're companies at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They need to make money, and so that means the evolution of our food has been to create, I think, food that's more pseudo addictive. I don't want to just use the word addictive,
Right.
because if you're gonna have people enjoy it, have people wanting more, then you're gonna make more profit, and so you just keep making it more and more palatable, more and more hyper processed, and now we're kind of all struggling with that. You see, obesity has risen and continues to rise in the
Yes.
United States. It's almost shocking how far can we go? When is this gonna slow down?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like Yeah, so like, is this gonna be the way we handle it? Manipulating what's going on hormonally so that our cravings go down and we can kind of reset it, because that's really what it is. I see it is, I care about helping people establish healthy behaviors. But sometimes, once you get to a certain point where you're so obese, you might not even be capable of walking to start a healthy behavior. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep.
And so, in some ways, this could be a benefit for resetting people in a place that helps them, like a way to restart and hopefully during that time be able to develop the healthy habits so they don't fall back into it. So I want to pause and see what you guys think about that.
I'll just say really quickly, I agree. I think it's a tremendous tool to kickstart change. It's a tremendous tool to break the endocrine cycle. And I even remember it was right after the semaglutides were even approved. It was right after they were approved for obesity usage, what, 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember I was on a car ride with my dad, and we were discussing this and discussing the implications of obesity. My dad's a physician researcher, so this is something that he's familiar with. And we remember we were talking about it right there is maybe this is the chance to finally break the cycle of obesity. Maybe this is a chance to finally get people back on their feet, to start establishing healthy habits. Because you're right. Once people have gone down that road, they may no longer have the choice to establish healthy habits because of the addictive qualities of food, because of the habit formation starting assistance. And I think from that point, that clip you showed is absolutely right. And I would even go so far as to say, for those people, it could be truly miraculous to be able to take these on. But I think there's a cautionary aspect that needs to go with it, and it's that lifestyle. You can't get something for nothing in this world. Ozempic might seem like that, but we need to be cautious that there are lifestyle changes that need to accompany this. As we become fitter and leaner, we have a higher or more of a need to continue those healthy lifestyles.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I would say, coming back to what you mentioned in terms of the obesity epidemic. That was another slide that I used last night. It's a nice little GIF that transitions from 1990 to 2010, and it's a CDC look at how heavy we have gotten from that time. Think of this. Okay, 1990. I don't know, Rylan, were you even alive in 1990? But Um, but in 1990, the percent of individuals that were considered obese was less than 10%. 2010, as we fast forward from 1990 to 2010, in that short a period of time, it's greater than 30% of the population that is considered obese. That's a short time frame. Okay. So what's changed? I dare you to look at food labels from today and match them against food labels in the 1980s. We can look, let's just look kind of at a side analogy and say, California, look, stop having fires. And if you would say, well, okay, we want to have less fires. And you'd say, well, get more water. We're trying, but we have a drought. No, get more water, do more water. So you're asking people to like do lifestyle, and what's available? Look at the foods. It's very difficult to find foods that are not in this obesogenic range, that are not high calorie. Sure, point at a Snickers bar or any candy bar, and it's 250 calories. But that's not the only thing out there that's nutrient dense, one little bar that won't fill you up because it doesn't have enough substance to it to fill you up. But it's so calorically dense. Then you're like, again, look at California and say, don't have fires. Okay, well, don't be obese. And I would say, well, we've got to change the environment. We have to change the climate that people are in. So, can this be a turning point? And are we cheating when we go to it? Well, it's it's kind of the fix until you change the environment. It's so hard, and you can say, "Well, gosh, why aren't you making your own food? You should take an hour and then you should sit down and eat." But these are folks that are living, 12 hours a day. Some of them hard labor, some of them have to travel an hour and an hour there, hour back. and where they travel to. They don't have a grocery store that has all the good things for them to get. What's available? Fast food. I see this in my own son who's, in a pipe fitting welding. He's going to wherever the site is. And it's not like, yeah, Dad, they gave me an hour and I just go and I pick through the outside of the store and get all the good stuff. No, he's like, I got 30 minutes. They yell at me if I don't get back. I'm getting McDonald's. I'm on the now like the $500 menu instead of the $1 menu that used to be available. So, I mean, but this is the thing is we have to make sure that from a systems level, we support this. You can't throw people out in the wild and say, hey, sorry, you built your house in California. We're not giving you any help at all. You just stop having fires. So we put them in these environments, and unfortunately, what it has is it's ramped up everything. Our body has now had a new set point in terms of weight, and then we say, well, do more exercise, eat less food, eat less calories, but it's not available for them. And so I think you're right. That conversation that you had with your father is that maybe this is the turning point, but it's just adding something. It's like I said this last night too when I talk to people. It's like we can give a medication for something, but then there's a side effect that you might have to give another medication for. And then that side effect you have to give another medication for. And wouldn't it have been just so great to not have the medication? Yes, it would have been so great to not have the medication. But here, the side effect of our current culture and society is that we kind of have to have something to stem the tide. And we kind of discussed this previously, but that chart of weight going up and up for the first time last year, and it's no mistake that we have compounding right now up until maybe another 5 or 6 months. But that compounding has provided a plateau. It's for the first time there was not an further increase in obesity here's
I mean,
2025, and we projected that in 2030 we'd have almost 50% of the population that would be obese, and it like thunk, it just stopped. It
that's
plateaued.
remarkable. That's
Yep.
huge news, like for population health management. That's huge. Now, Rylan, you got background in healthy habits maintenance, and I don't, but I read a book once called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I really like the book. Really good book. I highly recommend it to anyone. But one of the underlying themes I picked up on in that book is that for habits to be sustainable, you have to create an environment where the habit is the path of least resistance. If you make a habit surrounded by insurmountable tasks, it's not gonna keep going. But if you make a habit that's the easy way, if you've created your life around it, like that the good habits are the way to go, then they become sustainable. So I think that meshes very well with what you're saying, Viet, about we need to change the system level. And I'm
Yes.
curious, Rylan, I want to ask you about your thoughts on healthy habits, but Viet, I also want to ask you, have you matched food labels between now and the 1980s? Have you compared those? And then what were your findings?
Yeah. So the main changes that you find is, and this is where I think the FDA's kind of let us down a little bit in terms of nutrition, food, and really the industry has had a little bit too much influence within the FDA. But
It's one way to
for a
say it.
time, yeah, yeah, no, I'm just gonna put it out there because it's true. But this whole low fat thing, which was true, but trans fat, really, it's saturated fats are okay as long as you have these polyunsaturated, and but what happened was we took this term fat and we said, well, this just take all the fat out of everything, and the biggest change is the carbs, the processed carbohydrates that came in because fats were bad, but it's let's just take out the fats, but it made food bland. So if food's bland, people don't buy it, and they're like, and you can't sell it. So then you start to add sugars. That's kind of what crept in, is these sugars and more sugars. And it was like, I watch these funny threads or Insta reels where someone takes AI and says, make the most Jeep looking person, and then no more. And so that's kind of what happened, is the food was like, no, we need more carbs. Put more carbs in it. And then make it smaller so it's bite sized. And then we tricked everyone and said, well, yeah, you don't have to eat the big bar, eat the small little snack bites. And so then they did. So it is, the food labels are different. It contains more processed items, but more carbohydrates is really what happened. And then, they tricked us and made it bite sized so that we just couldn't have enough. Visually, you'd see this bar and say, oh, okay, that's pretty big. But then turns out if you just buy a bag of snack bites, you trick yourself into saying, well, I just eating this. Next thing you know, you probably ate around 4 candy bars, really. And it was, or more, thinking that you just bought these, ate these bite-sized things. So yeah, I mean, the food labels are much different, and the foods are more calorically dense. And we in America in particular were really good fans of a marketing thing called supersize.
Yeah,
We love value.
we do. And okay, so I want to change gears just a little bit here because I'm interested in the people who are going to be listening to this. Some of them might be wondering, hey, they talking about this Ozempic stuff, semaglutides. This might be something that I want to try. And I think the reality is we've hit on that there's certain cases where this could be really beneficial. And I think the specific cases we're talking about are people who are really obese in a way that like need that reset, as we've called it. But the reality is, number one, like these kind of drugs cost a lot of money. And,
Mhm.
and you're seeing people who are taking it who maybe aren't taking it necessarily for the health benefits, but want to take it for, the beach body type benefits. You know what I mean? And people who might not need it, people who, are capable of exercising, maybe they even are exercising, people who are capable of walking, people who have a little bit more self-control, but they want to lose an extra 10, 20 pounds. Their neighbors are on it. They've heard it's this hot new thing. So I kind of want to pose the question, like, and lean on your experience here, Viet, because you're working with people all the time. I see you're the expert here. Who is this for? Like, we
Yeah.
can't say that everyone needs to take semaglutides. I don't think. I think that's a bad idea. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of reasons for that. We can get into that. So who should be taking them? How much should your doctor be involved? Because these are becoming more and more available. People are able to take them with less and less doctor supervision. Where's the line there?
Yeah. And I'll flip the script back on you again.
Let's see. Yeah.
Um, Remember, it's not just one neighborhood in California that was at drought risk. It was large areas. And in this environment, no one wins in terms of calories and sedentary jobs and our hours of work and everything. First, people may be exercising, they may be, doing their best at food. And by the way, I have tons of patients who are doing all the things and they remain obese because again, it comes down to body chemistry. So that, quick clip, he said all the right things. There are just some folks that do all the right things and still find themselves obese. So on label, let's just talk about label because I think that's probably the most important thing in terms of where the data sits best and clinical trials have been done. So on label, when we think of GLP-1s, whether, Ozempic and Mounjaro and all the other GLP-1s, those are specific branded for diabetes. So let's set that aside for a second. Let's go to their weight management brands. So Wegovy is weight management, and it now has a cardiovascular risk reduction indication. And then you look at Zepbound, and it's weight management, but it now has an obstructive sleep apnea indication. So when you look at these medications, we can then pull back and say, let's just talk about the generic form because it's the same drug, semaglutide or tirzepatide. There's liraglutide. Let's not forget, that as well. But these medications for their weight management brand, they are meant for folks that have a BMI of 30 or greater. And that's top line. That's it. Okay, because it's already recognized, I already said, 50 to 90% prevalence of steatotic liver disease. It's not indicated for that treatment. It will be. I promise you. The phase 2, phase 3 trials are being started right now, and we should have an indication. We will have an indication for fatty liver disease within the next 1.5 to 2 years. That's how powerful these are. So when we look at BMI 30 or greater, it sets aside any type of thought here of, well, were you exercising? Were you eating food? Because itself, it has disease. Now, let me add in, that is part of the indication. In someone that is BMI greater than 30 who has been following lifestyle changes, it is not meant to just be taken because, well, I don't need to do anything. So you should have counseling. It should be discussed for lifestyle. It should be discussed for exercise therapy and starting a physical activity regimen. Then a BMI greater than or equal to 30. That's one of the indications. Now, the bar is set a little bit lower at 27 when you have other obesogenic diseases like high blood pressure. Okay. And then, or, sleep apnea or other like chronic kidney disease, those secondary risks that are actually sequelae. They're problems that come out from obesity. They may occur separately, but generally speaking, it's partly due to being overweight. And so those are the indications we should look at first, because that's what their FDA indication is for. But it's recognized that the reason why we're doing weight management in these folks is because downstream stuff, as you mentioned earlier, obesity is tied to so many diseases, and it's an amplifier, but it's also an initiator. It's the primordial nidus of disease for a lot of folks. So who should take it? Yeah, certainly. I think everyone who comes to me and has a BMI of 30 or greater, I am already saying, look, judgment aside, I am not going to tell you the things you've already heard, because at 35, you've heard all the things. Your family member has said, eat less. Your family member and friends have said, ugh, why are you so heavy? Eat less. Exercise more. The community has looked at them and said, why are you sitting next to me and why are you so heavy? I think you need to eat less and exercise more. This is horrible. This is what we do to people. And then to come to me and have me say, you know what? I think you probably haven't thought about eating less and exercising more. That's probably what the problem is. So I take all of that aside and say, I bet you have like all sorts of, you've tried the Lose It app, you've tried MyFitnessPal, and you're probably still doing all of those and just have failed miserably multiple times, not on your own, but because your body's fighting against you. And so let's consider this GLP-1, because this is how it works. And this is how it will help you and support you. And at some point, we may be able to go off of it, but I'll tell you, it's like hypertension. I don't just stop a blood pressure medication because your blood pressure drops in the normal range. It's probably because the blood pressure medication dropped you in the normal range. And so in this California wildfire environment of obesity, you're probably going to need this until we make major changes in the food environment.
So my background is in biochemistry, and a lot of the work that I do, used to do, not anymore, but was kind of on the molecular disease side.
Mhm.
And so I've got this concept that disease exists at a molecular level in the human body, potentially years, potentially decades before it ever exists at a clinical level. And so if we look at, and I've also got this side theory that the majority of disease is probably caused by metabolic problems. I don't know, I'll call it metabolic disease necessarily, but metabolic dysregulation. And so with that, if we consider obesity as a disease, which I think probably most people do at this point, and I do myself. So let's say obesity is a disease. Obesity then probably exists at a molecular level before it exists at a symptomatic level. And so the cause of obesity, the drivers for obesity are going to be existing before someone is necessarily obese.
Mm.
So, and I like to think about preventative medicine. I mean, I'm a big proponent of proactive care and value-based care, and really, regulating disease before it happens. I think it's estimated like 90 to 95% of the spending in the United States on healthcare goes to chronic disease treatment.
Yes.
And so when I see the spending being out of control, I think, let's just prevent chronic disease. If we can prevent it from ever happening, we solve so much of the issue. And so I believe that most chronic disease is preventable, honestly. I'll establish that up front. So could a GLP-1 inhibitors potentially be used preventatively to prevent this kind of thing from happening? And how could you do that in a way that it does not it where they can be used preventatively and not be abused?
Yeah. It's such a good question, and I think, that there's so many layers to this. There's so many layers to this, and I would say, first of all, I agree. It is a primordial thing. How do we? So let me just bring up the American Heart Association Presidential Advisory that was published about a year ago on cardiovascular, kidney, metabolic health. They recognize this as a cardiovascular association, and so if you have the chance, go to their paper and look at Figure One. They look at the stages of disease here, and figured quite highly is, stage 0 is everyone that's just healthy, period, like you have nothing. But the moment that you are obese or overweight, you're in stage 1, and you're already on the pathway down the line to the other chronic diseases. When you talk about the biochemical level, or at that really small, it's not even atomic, but at that level of molecular disease, we don't think twice when we talk about addiction, and folks that in genetic inherited addictions, we're like, oh yeah, they've got alcoholism in their family, and you're at risk, so don't drink. So here, some of that is yeah, it's kind of baked in, this potential for obesity in populations that are now exposed to foods and things that they were never exposed to. So it's like, oh, let's just crush opioids and put them in the water and see who gets addicted, right? That's kind of what we've done to people, and so they respond. They're like, ooh, good food, yeah, I feel better, and that's what eat my feelings is kind of like. So there's that part of it, and yes, I think it is kind of the genesis of a lot of these other chronic ailments, and in fact, a lot of these other things have increased commensurate with the weight increase in our country. So we spend a lot of time treating downstream stuff. Why not go upstream? Now, with regards, and I didn't quite address the cost question in here. That's arbitrary. That's set by first industry, what they want to charge, but then the PBMs. I'm going to throw them under the bus. The PBMs, they really don't need to exist, but they stand as a middle person in all of this. They make all the money, but give no benefit to anyone. So
And
some of
in this
this,
case, PBMs are pharmacy benefits
yeah,
managers, correct? Yeah.
yes, thank you for. I always forget that we have a wide audience. So yes, these folks that somehow contract things out and get plugins, we don't need them. But does it cost $1,500 to make this? No, it does not. I challenge you, Eli Lilly. I challenge you, Novo Nordisk, to come out and tell us what it costs, because it doesn't cost that much. But I get, making up on your R&D and being, able to make a I get that, but on the backs of whom? It's not worth that much. It isn't. But at the same time, the cost on the other side of a heart attack, of a stroke, if you should survive it, the management afterwards, diabetes, all the drugs that are used there, and you say, well, let's just use one medication up front earlier and see what we avoid downstream in terms of extra medications, extra events that are disabling, not just events. They're not just things that happen to you, they're disabling. And so there's that part of the loop that we have to answer here with regards to using these and what the true cost is. We spend 13% or more of our gross domestic product here in America for sick care, not for health care, for sick care. Let me explain. As we look at our spending versus the next like 5 to 10 countries that are developed, we outspend them. You know who is in first place for great, healthy people? Not the US. The US is not number one. We're like in the bottom. We spend the most to be at the bottom. And folks, it's because we incentivize sick care. We don't incentivize proactive value-based care. That's and yes, I'm biased, but at Intermountain, helping people live the healthiest lives possible. That's my goal. And this is
Yeah.
part of that. This is part of it.
Hey, we're all biased in some way, right? No
Yeah.
one's free of bias. Okay, so the way we've been talking about this, in a lot of ways, I think the takeaway here is that this has a lot of enormous potential. Like like if this is the solution to the obesity epidemic, then that's going to be huge in the United States for saving costs, helping people live longer, chronic disease management, so on and so forth. I want to ask about something because I don't think it's all just sunshine and rainbows yet. Maybe it will be. But like when it comes to these GLP-1, because that's what it is. Like it's essentially just GLP-1 hormone, right? I don't.
It's a receptor agonist, and so
Okay, yeah.
so it's not the
So it
GLP-1, but
binds to. It's not GLP-1 itself, but it kind of acts like it. Is that the right way to think
yeah,
about it?
yeah, yeah. It locks
Right.
the gate open. Yep.
Okay, so basically, if I understand right, it's helping your pancreas create more insulin, lowering your blood sugar, helping your liver be slower at producing sugars, right? So it's basically suppressing your appetite, all that, right?
Yeah. So all the front end, it supports all of that,
Okay.
but essentially,
Okay.
it makes you feel full, and it suppresses that appetite from craving for foods. Yep.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for clarifying. I think people will appreciate that clarification. So so it kind of makes sense when you think about diabetes, why these kind of came out for diabetes purposes, right? Because insulin's the problem there.
Yeah.
And if you can take these medications, help promote insulin creation, help regulate your blood sugar, that's good, right? And they've been around, I think, for a while for people with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. But from what I understand, they started being approved for weight management starting in 2021, right?
That's right.
And so I'm over here thinking, okay, like it seems to work, but we really don't have the data yet to know the long-term effects for people who are taking it who don't have diabetes. Because with diabetes, I think it kind of makes sense that you're almost bringing it back up to a regular level. But with some of these people who don't have diabetes, aren't we elevating essentially GLP-1 in their bodies? And when you're messing with hormones, I get a little shy about what that could mean because our hormones go up and down all the time. You exercise and cortisol goes up, I think. So like that's not a bad thing. The problem is when they're chronically elevated, right? It seems to me that like, okay, they're good while you're on them because it helps you get rid of obesity. It's probably not the best idea to be on them forever because who knows, maybe elevated GLP-1 for a long time is bad. I guess we'll find out. But then the problem is if you go off of them, then you're still in that same environment that caused you to get sick in the first place. So, like, are we just stuck here? Are we just crossing our fingers that the long-term effects are okay and we're just going
I
to,
mean, yes.
everyone's just going to be on GLP-1 forever?
I mean, that's the drug approval process, right? Like once a drug is approved, it doesn't mean that monitoring's over. I mean, the FDA monitors drugs indefinitely. So like, they're watching for those things. And there's huge studies going on, observational studies. In fact, I think it's Oracle Cerner has an enormous database that has data on over a third of the country. And they're watching for those things. They're paying attention to those things for those very reasons. So you can see what's happening on a population level. But if you don't mind, I want to go in a little bit of a different direction based on something you said, because there's one thing about Ozempic and GLP-1 inhibitors that bothers me, and probably the most. And it's similar to what you said earlier, Viet. 1980s, 1990s, or 1990, like somewhere through that period, less than 10% of the population was obese.
Yep.
Today, it's over 30.
Yep.
Well over 30. So it seems to me that the obesity epidemic isn't a necessary problem, but it's a byproduct of companies profiting and influencing the FDA. And do we really need a $1 billion solution to a problem that doesn't need to exist? Or should we rather be investing ourselves at a system level to correct those root cause issues, to go back to less processed, less carbohydrate, less refined carbohydrate? Is that really the best solution here? Because that was probably a cheaper solution manufacturing-wise, cheaper solution for the food industry. The food industry makes more money when food is hyper-palatable.
Isn't the
And
cat already out of the bag? Like once it's out, how do you put that back in? Because the idea would be like everyone suddenly stops buying
I
these
mean, that's not
foods,
going to happen,
but
right?
you're already addicted, right? Like everyone.
No, I'd be very
Anyway, that's
upset
just
if
my thought.
Oreos came off the market, realistically. Like I love Oreos, but
Yeah.
Me too.
nevertheless, it stands. It stands of with all of this, the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry profit. They co-profit off of problems that each other causes. And we foot the bill for that. We foot it from both a financial perspective, but also a health perspective. We kind of sacrifice our health for this. And I think this is so when I see this, the GLP-1 inhibitors, I see it as not a silver bullet, but as a huge chance to really change things for individuals and to really start making ground in the battle against chronic disease. I really believe that. But then the other side of me says, but obesity doesn't need to exist in the first place. Like we don't need to, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could ramble on about this for a while. I'm curious,
No,
what do you guys think?
yeah. So first, I'm gonna roll us back just a little bit, and again, as a GLP-1 receptor agonist, it doesn't increase GLP levels at all, so we won't have to worry about
Okay.
that. So yeah, you don't get this weird offset or anything like that. It just essentially
Okay.
agonizes the receptor and leaves it open and
Uh-huh.
makes us feel like we have extra GLP-1. When it's produced, it
So
really
it doesn't elevate the hormone.
no,
That's good to know.
no,
Okay.
no.
Yeah. See, I don't know a lot of this stuff,
No,
and
no,
Yeah.
it's
I
okay.
don't think a
It's
lot of
good.
people.
It's good that
Downstream
This,
hormones could be
yeah.
regulated.
Yes,
Could,
yeah, it could affect
but
all of those. Yeah, yep,
yeah.
okay.
yep,
Interesting.
yep.
Uh.
And so I would say,
Anyway, keep going.
yeah. So from that perspective, no worries in terms of like having hyper GLP-1 produced. But I would say the downstream regulation ends up being that you have more normalization of insulin, of all the other hormones that get dysfunctional when you have visceral organ fat, visceral adiposity. And so as that reduces, then you have a better regulation of all sorts of things. Now, coming to this, do we really need $1 billion industry? I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but we already have like a $3 billion industry in Utah in the nutraceutical business. And I will argue that we don't need that. We don't need people buying that stuff. It's not helpful to the majority of the population. It's not proven to be healthy. If we're 30% or more fat and we have all sorts of chronic diseases, the nutraceutical business has not helped anyone until they prove otherwise. They're a $3 billion industry. Okay. So as we come back to the cost again, I challenge Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk and all the others that are supplying this at such a high cost. It doesn't need to be that $1 billion industry, and in fact, it could remain that at a lesser cost. More people could have access to it. Again, get rid of the PBMs, and I think that will be helpful in terms of folks being able to have access at low cost and reasonable. But what you haven't addressed is that amongst my patients, when they're on this and their food cravings stop, guess what they're not buying? And I bet you to a certain degree, the food industry has noticed this.
Sure.
People are buying their stuff less. And when you can get in front of the train that has already gained speed and suddenly they're like, oh no, we don't have any more coal to sustain this. Oh no, we've run out of fuel to sustain this train. It may actually be the impetus for them to go, huh, okay, I guess we need to change what we make because people aren't buying it. They've had to circumvent our ability to make them addicted by being on this medication. And if more people have the medication and access to it, and we have less heavy people, guess why they're less heavy? It's not because we increase their metabolism so they can eat like they've been eating. We've reduced their intake. It's an appetite
Interesting.
suppressant. And if you've lost your food craving, guess what you're not buying?
Mhm.
You're not buying the
Oreos.
foods. Yeah,
Yeah.
This is
exactly.
going to transform the whole
Interesting.
economy potentially. Real quick,
I hadn't thought about that.
there's this other aspect that I'm wondering about how you see it, Viet, with mental health. Like because people
Mm.
are coming in, and I wonder what that's like to bait, because in some sense they're almost like, look, I've tried everything, I've failed. That's not, I don't know, that can't be easy to hear. I wonder how that's going to impact mental health. Like should people, like if someone needs to go on this and they're consulting with you and they're like, look, my family is kind of pressuring me because like they don't think I exercise or eat good enough. I kind of think I want to go on this because I need it for my health, but like I feel like I've let them down. I feel like I've let myself down because I got myself in this rut. How do you work with that? That seems challenging.
It is challenging. Like I said, we've done this to people. We as a community have beat these people down, and we continue to do so when we stare at them as they come in, and as you're, seating yourself down, and this implicit bias. You might not think you're doing it, but you're like, "Whoa, I hope they're not sitting next to." People do that. Guess who feels that? The person who's heavy. So I lean right on into it. I can't tell you how many patients have, at the end or in the middle of a conversation, they break down and cry because I've given them an open space and I acknowledge all the things they've experienced. And I can speak to that having had a BMI that's been 30 and reduce my weight and, recognize that that's not fun. And the fight that we have with food is not fun. And I say, look, you know, because your family has told you, eat less and exercise more, you tell me, have you been trying it? Oh, yeah, yeah, but I'm not successful. I know. So it's not like you've let yourself down. Let's talk about what your body has done to you. And we go through, that process of appetite regulation, how their body has really fought that set point. The body wants to keep that weight. And so everything that you're doing is great, but it's not that successful. Let's support it. Let's augment it. Let's give you some success here. And as we have that conversation, then they're like, oh, I don't have to feel guilty because this is kind of like high blood pressure. I can't just wish my blood pressure down. This is like having high cholesterol that's genetic. I can't just wish it down. And it gives them hope. And as we work through this, like month 2, month 3, they're like, oh my gosh, all the things that I've been trying, they're working now. I'm like, "Yes, your body's we've taken that out of the field. We've taken the body's best player, this ghrelin that goes up and says, 'You're hungry.'" The metabolism that slows down because it's like, "No, hold on to the calories." We've taken all the best players off the field so that you can have success, and all
Wonderful.
those things that you've tried
Mhm.
are now helping, and you're able to sustain it.
Interesting. Now, we could talk about this for hours. I think this is something I have a lot of feelings about. Yeah, you've got a lot of experience. But realistically, your time is valuable because you're helping people change their lives. And I don't want to take more of your time than we need to. So, I mean, perhaps we could transfer it now and say, Viet, if you had 1 minute approximately to really tell people this message or, something related to this message, what would that message be?
Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. You have tried. You are trying. You will continue to try. Continue to do the things that you know are healthy. Watch that food, exercise more, be physically active, but give yourself grace. That body has been fighting against you. Be okay with asking and advocating. Don't be embarrassed to advocate for yourself. If you have a primary care provider that you'd like to approach with this, approach them with it. You should not be made to feel guilty for wanting to have support in your weight loss efforts. Recognize that it is unhealthy to be overweight. You know this, and you're working on it. But I would say find those moments in your life, wherever you're doing, to try to increase activity as best you can. Walk from farther, take stairs if you can. Now, some are just heavy enough that the joints hurt. And until you start to lose that weight, it becomes problematic. So don't do things that are harmful to your body, but try to increase and intentionally add activity, and then make those efforts, continue to make those efforts to watch that food intake and make those right choices. But I think until we change the environment around you, you're living in a drought and those fires occur. So be okay with engaging and being empowered to ask for a little bit of help here. And there are those of us who recognize this, and we'll walk with you, we'll journey with you. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I think that this is a space that we should be open and transparent about.
That's inspiring. I think that your message is a message of hope. I find our conversations that we've had have always been uplifting. You've got a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and I think that you genuinely care. And that comes back to me and helps brighten my day. And so I hope the viewers of this also see that as well, and see this as a chance to really sit in the driver's seat of their own health, which is really what we're all looking for right now.